What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. What is going on, everybody? What a time to be alive. What an incredible time to love football. We got William Belichick accepting the North Carolina. He's going to college. I did a video yesterday when the news broke, reacting to the information on Wednesday afternoon. Today, I want to hit on a program that I think could be kicking themselves. And in fairness to them, sometimes timing is a little out of your control. And we have a massive Thursday night game. Last week set records on Amazon. Thursday Night Football. Over 17 million people streamed that game. It was fantastic. Dan Campbell went for it. Incredible moment. Tonight, we have Niners versus the Rams, which has been an excellent rivalry over the last 5 or 6 years with two of the better teams in the NFC. So I want to dive into that. And then something that I clearly got wrong at the beginning of the season. And watching Hard Knocks, I realized why I got it wrong. And I think it kind of ties directly into the Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown situation. So we will talk some football. It's December. It's getting cold. Even in Arizona, it's like 50 degrees. I'm cold. I got a hoodie on. It's football weather. We got the college football playoffs. We got Belichick headed to campus. We got the final stretch of the NFL season. It just is awesome. I love the month of December. I'm a warm weather guy, but I do love December. I like, it's definitely my favorite cold weather month by far. Like most people, it's got Christmas. It's got, New Year's right around the corner. It's just a lot of people are happy. And if you're not, hopefully, we can put a smile on your face here. But before we dive into football, I know this. If I had gone to North Carolina, if I was a North Carolina fan, there is no way on God's green earth I wouldn't attend a game next year. I got Bill Belichick as my head coach. If I went to one of these other schools in the ACC and we were playing North Carolina, I would go to that game. And that's the cool part about these ticketing apps. My friends, my partners at Game Time, the number one ticketing app in America, they got you covered. Because if you want to go to a game, Christmas, Hanukkah, my Jewish friends, right around the corner. You need to get someone something. Well, guess what? Get them a pair of tickets to a concert, to a game, maybe next year. Are you a Mets fan? You want opening day tickets to watch your boy Juan Soto? He just got $950 million, minus $200 million, which is $750 million. Here's what you do. You do something that's very easy. You take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code JOHN, that's my name, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code JOHN, John, for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Well. Belichick to North Carolina. I was thinking about, I think about this a lot, the importance, and I've benefited greatly from this. When you say the word timing and timing being on your side, it's benefited me personally, in a professional way greatly. And obviously some of the great business stories in the history of America, from Steve Jobs to Jeff Bezos to Elon, timing has been a huge part of their success. Like Tesla doesn't exist if it's 1980, but he has the idea, the way everything's worked, I would say economically, where some of these states are moving, in terms of what they're pushing, it benefited him. He got huge tax breaks from California to build this and start his company. And it helped lead Tesla into just a very fruitful time. Obviously, Jeff Bezos starts a company that is selling books online. Well, part of the idea behind that was he realized the brick and mortar was in trouble. And then as time went, he adapted his company and now they sell everything. But it really wouldn't have worked without, the internet, which changed the game. Think of Apple. Like, you could argue the most important invention of my lifetime. Like the car, the wheel, fire, light, all that shit was already invented before I was born. Definitely the most impactful one has to be this phone, which they clearly have a market share on, right? If you sit down with 100 people, I would say close to it's shocking when you don't see one of them having an iPhone. Now, obviously, it wouldn't be 100%, but I would guess if you just grabbed 100 people, that number is much closer to 90 than it is 70, and potentially closer to 100 than it is 80. So I've benefited from that. What I'm doing now, when I got out of radio, if it would have been 1993, this would not have existed. I couldn't have done a radio show, which are podcasts, obviously, that is different, but and create a studio from my home. It wouldn't have been possible. Partly because the internet didn't exist. I wouldn't have been able to distribute it. You wouldn't have been able to find me. I remember the first time I heard who Chris Russo and Mike Francesa were, and I started listening to them on the internet. Well, when I was a kid, when they were crushing it in New York in the late 90s, I was a sports radio junkie. But you didn't have access to people outside of your market. You didn't even know who they were. I remember the first time I ever saw Jim Rome's picture. I'm like, that's what he looks like? Imagine now listening to someone in an audio form and not knowing what they look like. The access we have to a visual of what a guy looks like is so easy. You Google them, you go to their Instagram account, basically you pull up their podcast, you see their picture. When I was a kid, you listened to the radio, you had no clue what anyone looked like in talk radio. Obviously, musicians, you did. And timing has changed the world, right? When it comes to the internet and the businesses associated with the internet. Well, when you look at North Carolina, like they benefited a lot from, they're one of the only jobs open right now that has a lot of money behind them. And Bill Belichick clearly was looking ahead and realizing I'm probably not going to get an NFL job. Or it's not worth the risk of I might only have one or two interviews and there's no guarantee I am. So the old adage of bird in the hand is better than two in the bush, and he jumped at it. But there is no disputing that North Carolina historically is not a great college football job. It's not bad. It's had its moments. But when you think of top, I don't know, 40 college football jobs, I don't even think you would list North Carolina. Now, the world has changed with NIL. There is a giant elephant in the room with a massive job potentially opening. Ryan Day, after he lost to Michigan, listen, there were already some question marks regardless of what the media wanted to tell you. Once he lost that game, no one surrounded with that program, alumni, booster, or people working as chancellors, board of directors, or athletic directors could look at the guy the same. They just can't. He's got a game here in about 8-9 days at home against Tennessee. If he loses that game, you can't convince me that they wouldn't rather have Bill Belichick than Ryan Day coaching them. Here's the problem. You can't fire Ryan Day today because you still have this game. But there is a very, very good chance that if he loses that game, you're like, we would have easily fired him for Bill Belichick. Now, we'll see as the information comes out. Was a huge sticking point for Bill, making his son the coach in waiting. I don't have this information at the time I'm recording this. But even if they wouldn't, you can't convince me if Bill goes, because he's willing to take a college job. Obviously, he literally just did. He's cool with it. He's all in. That he wouldn't have taken Ohio State, and Ohio State people wouldn't want him over Ryan Day. Because what is the big question mark right now with Ohio State? It's not money. It's not NIL. I just read a report that North Carolina, one of their sales pitches to Bill was, we'll go from 4 or 5 million NIL. We'll get that bad boy up to 20. Ohio State paid 20 this year without blinking an eye. I saw the printout of the highest paid coaches, assistant coaches this year in college football. 2 of them were on Ohio State staff. Chip Kelly makes $2 million, and their defensive coordinator makes about 2.5. So his 2 coordinators make NFL coordinator money. And they also have a wide receiver coach who's their recruiting coordinator making well over $1 million. So in terms of staff budget, in terms of NIL, and in terms of prominence, standing, everything surrounded with it, Ohio State has it all. Part of taking the North Carolina job is there's going to be some effort Bill's going to have to put in to get the top players, even with NIL. And you can sign the biggest checks, but it's still going to take some time. Ohio State recruits itself. That has never been an issue my entire life. They've always got the best players. You give them Bill Belichick, because the question mark with the program has been toughness, physicality. Where do they wilt when they play Michigan? Why? Because they're just not as tough. It's not in their soul. It's not in their ethos. What do you say when you think Bill Belichick? You think defense. That is truly his baby. Building a program of tough guys. Honestly, when you think his offense, same thing. Tom Brady, an underrated intangible he has, tough motherfucker. Julian Edelman, Logan Mankins, Rob Gronkowski, all the guys they had in the iteration in the early 2000s, tough guys. North Carolina, I don't know how good he's going to be. Like, I think their team's going to be, above 500 next year, but I'm not predicting they're making the playoffs or anything. I think in the next couple of years, they are going to be something to be reckoned with. But if you put him at Ohio State next year, like what is honestly Bill's biggest advantage? He's smarter at football than everybody. Maybe Andy Reid's probably the one guy now who's elevated to his level. But Bill's X's and O's ability at every position is better than everybody. When you watch Ryan Day, it's like, well, he's a pretty good passing game guy, but the rest of the team, defense, a little hit or miss, toughness, definitely hit or miss. And it's like the running game since Urban Meyer left has just not been the same. And it's not because of players. So I wonder if Ohio State, and listen, there's nothing they could do. It's just kind of bad timing. They were a week away of, why wouldn't they immediately call this guy? Can we fire Ryan Day and hire this guy? The problem is, as of December 11th, it would be difficult to fire Ryan Day. And I just think timing wasn't on their side, because I wonder if this was a little different, that, you know, if Bill was willing, and there's some pressure on Bill to take this job because recruiting, the transfer portal's open. If he was a week away, that he could be the head coach at Ohio State. And even if they wouldn't acquiesce to your son's the coach in waiting, well, if Bill wins a national championship, they'd probably let him do whatever he wants. You want to make Steve the next coach? They literally just did it with Urban Meyer. Ryan Day had never done shit. He'd been a position coach, coordinator, kind of, you know, before he got to Ohio State. A couple years with Urban, boom, he's the head coach. So if Belichick were to win a title is what Urban did, they would be cool with letting him hand it off. They literally just did it. And for their standards, they wish it was a little better. Still not bad. But I wonder if you're an Ohio State fan, you go, God, couldn't we just have had Belichick? If I told you right now, if you're an Ohio State fan, would you fire Ryan Day today, even going into this playoffs, to hire Belichick? Even if it meant losing to Tennessee? Of course you would. Because the reality is, you might lose that game anyway. And then you'll probably be stuck with the guy for another year. And if I also told Michigan, or definitely if I told Michigan, Sharon Moore, the AD, and everyone associated with that program, if I told Penn State and James Franklin, if I told Oregon, if I told Alabama, if I told Georgia, would you rather play Ryan Day or would you rather play Bill Belichick? Would it take them a second or 2 seconds to answer that question? So, massive day for UNC. And if I was an Ohio State fan, I'd be like, so Belichick's cool with coming to college? Like he's actually doing the jump? And we're stuck with Ryan Day and Chip Kelly? And we might lose at home in a week to Tennessee after Michigan just beat us when their quarterback threw for 60 yards? It's got to suck. Okay, let's get into the Thursday night game. When you think marquee games, especially primetime games, they always show up that visual of like, you know, like when the Chiefs play the Bills. It's like Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes, right? You throw on the Eagles this week, Pittsburgh against the Eagles. It's like Saquon and TJ Watt, right? Or Russell Wilson versus Jalen Hurts. It's like players. What has really helped football separate from everyone else? Because ultimately it's a reality television show. That's what sports are. It's reality television. When I was a kid, all three major sports, basketball, baseball, and football, the players weren't just the stars. Coaches were massive. Phil Jackson and Pat Riley were every bit as popular is the wrong way to put it, but as famous. Phil Jackson was as famous as basically every player in the league at certain times, besides maybe like Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, who were on his team. Pat Riley is one of the most famous basketball figures of all time. Obviously in college basketball forever, the most famous people were the coaches. In baseball, when I was a kid, the managers were a really big deal. Now they make less than an offensive line coach does at the University of Georgia. They don't really play a part in the whole thing. In football, what they really got going for them, obviously it's popular because of the scarcity of the inventory, and you only get one game a week. Every game matters. We know all that. But it's the power of the characters. The owners are really famous. The assistant coaches are really famous. The head coaches are equivalent to players. And the unique part of this Niner-Rams matchup is, I would say, the two poster childs. Like if you're just going Niners versus the Rams, this entire time, there's a team, one's won a Super Bowl, both of them have been to two. They've been really good. They are by far, if every coach got fired, of every guy under 50, they would be the first two hires. They are the poster childs. Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan. And I think that's what makes this right. And obviously they have a connection. They work together. They're all under this umbrella. Their cronies are all over the league. Even though they do it differently, I think McVay is much more inclined to run like a drop back passing game when Kyle really wants to play like 1985 football and run it 40 times a game. So they are on the opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of, I think, deep down their offensive philosophy. Like if they could call one play, what would it be? Kyle would be a run, Sean would be a pass. But they both come from the football school of they love tough physical players. I was thinking about today at the gym, like, I wonder if what they hoped Ricky Pearsall would become, and part of the reason they drafted him, is because they just saw Puka Nacua. When you look at the Rams, like their defensive line, Jared Verse and Fisk, the two defensive linemen from Florida State, are guys Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch would like. They like old school football players despite being two young guys. But when you think the 49ers and when you think the LA Rams over the last 7-8 years, the Rams have one of the greatest players in the history of the sport that just retired in Aaron Donald. And you still think Sean McVay. The 49ers over the last 3 or 4 years are littered with some of the best players in the league. George Kittle, Trent Williams, Nick Bosa, Fred Warner. I'd say Debo, but he's fallen off a cliff a little bit. Christian McCaffrey. And you still think Kyle Shanahan. And that's what's cool about this matchup. Now, from a game perspective, there's a lot on the line. I thought the Niners were dead. I still am not that confident, right? I don't put that much stock against the Bears, a team that just went 1-2-3 Cancun. I'm not one. I have a lot of respect for any player in the NFL. I have a lot of respect for anyone that plays football. It's a very tough sport. In college, definitely the NFL. Any good high school player, it's hard. But that was as shitty of an effort. Like, they looked early on, that Bears team, like, we don't want to play this game. Like, we're just over this season. So it's hard for me to know how to put how much stock into that game. But if the Niners had any sort of slim chance to just make their season have an opportunity they had to win that game. And they did. Then they get a short week against the Rams, who historically Shanahan has owned McVay beside the one game that really mattered, the NFC Championship game when Kwaski Tart dropped a pick, but that's another story for another day. I still think the Niners have some question marks. Obviously, their top two running backs are injured. That's a problem for a coach that wants to run it. Trent Williams is out of this game. Nick Bosa, up in the air. We'll see if he's able to play on Thursday. Fred Warner hasn't been the same guy. Why? He's dealing with a broken bone in his foot. Their starting running back last week, Garendo, who is a good player, sprained his foot. And he's also a question mark to play this week. So I still think the Niners have a ton of question marks. Though Brock Purdy looked dramatically better against a gutless Bears team than he had the previous weeks. So if they get that version of Purdy with Jawan Jennings, with Debo, they still would have a chance. I think the Rams are a weird team because when everyone came back, I'm like, get ready, this team is coming. And then for like 3 weeks, that Miami Dolphin game, hell, last week against the Saints, 2 weeks ago against the Saints, they just don't look right. Something just looks off. And I was like, I'm kind of out on this. And then you watch them against the Bills, you're like, this is the team I thought we were getting all season. I have no clue who's going to win this game. I'm not going to put any money on this game because I honestly don't know. You'd be like, maybe the Niners are back and they just blast McVay. Wouldn't shock me if you told me the Niners lost by 10 points. We saw them play the Rams a lot earlier in this season when the Rams had injuries. Somehow the Rams came from 10 points back in the second half. And honestly, that's kind of started the season off on the wrong foot. So I don't know. But I just know that this is easily one of the best matchups in the NFL, regardless who's playing, because of the two head coaches, who are the two stars of the team. The NFL season is rolling along, and the contenders are separating from the pack. The one thing that hasn't changed this season, DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And it's the number one place to bet touchdowns. Long bombs, fades to the end zone, big runs, you name it. We do not care how you get them. We just want to bet touchdowns at DraftKings, and it's the best place to do it. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like a player scoring a touchdown. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your first pick. Here's a reason for new customers to do a touchdown dance on their own. Bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the number one place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets. If your bet wins, just bet $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Speaking of head coaches who started the team, this is where I got the Steeler Russell Wilson situation wrong. Russell's not really, he just feels too much of a politician for me. And I get it, like part of being a public quarterback or coach, like sometimes being authentic doesn't benefit you. So being a bullshit artist, and I'm not even saying he's a bullshit artist, but the cliche answers and just saying nothing is not a bad thing to do. Like I understand the mindset behind doing that. It just felt like he just never breaks character every time you see him 24/7, 365. And I've never argued that Russell in his heyday in Seattle wasn't just an elite player. But I was like, this guy's going to go to Pittsburgh, this blue collar, tough guy operation that is just defense first, that just has a bunch of dudes, also has a couple crazies that Tomlin can handle, and it's going to work. Obviously, I was wrong because it's worked really, really well. Hell, it goes back. I thought they should have kept going with Fields. I think a lot of people agreed with me. And clearly, that was 100% the right decision. Russell is a dramatically better passer. But I haven't watched the new Hard Knocks, but I watched the first episode. And obviously, like any human being that follows football, you've watched a lot of Mike Tomlin. You know where I got it wrong? Is I don't know if it really matters if Russell's like some galvanizing great leader like Peyton Manning or Tom Brady or Drew Brees. Because that's Tomlin's job. And that's kind of his gig with this squad. So as long as Russell played well, regardless of he's getting beers with the boys, he's like, hey, you guys want to hit the nightclub on Thursday? He's clearly not doing that. But it doesn't matter because the main voice for the squad is the head coach, who is probably improving again one of the most unique leaders we have ever seen in the history of sports. He's pretty special. And I also got it wrong. I thought it was time for a divorce last year. I didn't think he should get fired and like be out of the league. I thought it was just like go somewhere else. Go to the Bears. Go to a new team, go to the Cowboys, start anew. You just need a fresh start. I was wrong because I think the Steelers can win this week. And I think they're going to be in a position to win this week. I think it's going to be an excellent game. I'm as excited for this game. I mean, there can't be 5 games going into a weekend so far in this NFL season that I'm more excited to watch than the Steelers at the Eagles. And if Russell just plays under control, which he has, I thought he made 2 of the better throws this season. We know he can throw the go route. We know he can throw the lollipop down the sideline. But he's making some touch throws on the move. I'm fascinated to watch this. And listen, this team, the heartbeat of this team starts and ends with Mike. And a little like Kyle and McVay, like you could argue. Now, TJ Watt is, I would say, one of the more famous non-quarterbacks, partly because of the last name, partly because he's one of the best players in the league. But you could easily, like, I don't think anyone would argue with you, who's the poster child of the Steelers when you close your eyes. You might say it's Mike Tomlin. And that's why this situation has been so great for Russell. And if he keeps playing well, I think this is a good spot for Russell to just stay and play for this team, right? Because where else is he going to play that is better equipped and set up for the guy? And speaking of leadership, there was a story last week. Obviously, the Niners were in free fall, and they had just lost 2 games by a combined 73-20. Now, granted, that was on the road in Green Bay and on the road in Buffalo, 2 playoff teams. But, I mean, the Niners was in the Super Bowl, and they got shellacked, and it was embarrassing. And Purdy just looked – and the whole thing, they just looked completely overwhelmed. And Kyle had 2 players speak to the team on Saturday night to try to just kind of rally the troops before the Bears game. And Diamador Lenore, who just got a $90 million extension, who's one of the better young DBs in the NFL, spoke. And it ended with Brock Purdy. And John Lynch was on local radio in the Bay Area this week and just said it was just, Brock's good. I mean, he's good in front of the team because everyone on the team respects him. And, when you're one of the top 3 or 4 guys in the league, Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, your talent is so immense. Even if you have, and obviously all these guys I think are widely considered high character guys, great leaders. But like historically, like Roethlisberger or whoever, you don't have to be Mr. Peyton Manning to like out. You're the best player. Everyone follows your lead. The majority of good quarterbacks are not viewed as like the top 3 or 4 guys. It's the next 5 to 12. And I think the separating factor of that group is like everyone freaking loves Jared Goff. Everyone loves Dak Prescott. Like these guys are universally considered by their teammates as high-level guys and well-respected. And this is where I knew Trey Lance was in trouble a couple years ago because the way their teammates talked about Jimmy Garoppolo when he was starting, it's like, God, they didn't even want Trey starting. And then once Purdy began starting, it was like, God, the defensive guys, because they've gone against him on scout team forever, love him. I mean, they love this guy. And then during the bye week, where's Brock Purdy? He's on vacation with George Kittle in Montana. And part of being a quarterback is like part of being, a CEO or general. You need people to follow your lead. You need people in a weird way to not just respect you, but like you. And I think Tom Brady is widely considered the greatest teammate in the history of the league. I remember texting with a guy who played at Fresno State when I was there, who played on the Chargers forever when Phillip Rivers retired. And he's like, him and Stafford, he also played in the Lions, Kenny Wiggins. He's like, those are two of my favorite teammates of my life. They're just, they're beloved in the locker room. And it's a quality that, like, listen, it's hard to have. I bet, some people that know me probably don't like me. Some people that, if you're listening to this, don't like you. Like, you don't act, but when you're the quarterback, and I remember Carson Palmer telling me this at this Fox retreat thing in like 2019 in Laguna Beach. Um, Coward, a bunch of Fox, iHeart people were there. And I remember they flew me out. And that was the first time I ever went on Jet SX. And anyone that's flown that, it's not like, it's like commercial private. You're on the plane with a bunch of other people, but you can walk in 5 minutes before. And I thought, they send me the private fucking jet? Is this, I didn't even understand what I was getting on at first. And then I realized, like, no, not kinda, not really. It's just instead of spending $200 on a ticket, they spent 450, but it was cool. And it's, if you ever get the chance to fly Jet SX, highly recommend it. It's hard to ever go back into the main airport after that. But Carson Palmer was at the event. Wide range of people, everywhere from like Steve Garvey, Coward, Sean Hannity, Carson Palmer, a lot of different people there. But I remember just Chris Broussard. I remember talking hoops with him. We were having cocktails and talked to Carson, and he later came on this podcast actually. And this is before, I'm sure a lot of people listening now listen to the show. And one thing he mentioned is like the one thing he misses the most about being a quarterback wasn't a touchdown throw, wasn't even like game day or a practice. It was every day walking into that building in Arizona, in Cincinnati, and knowing that everyone in the building was relying on you. And that pressure was like inspiring. And you felt it every day that everyone's looking at you, defense included. And being a quarterback is really, really hard. That's why only a small percentage of guys excel at it in college and definitely in the pros. And I watched Sirianni's press conference today. I thought he did a good job. I mean, it was a tough spot. I mean, he's like, listen, playing the Steelers, good team. I know none of you are going to ask about me. Fire away. It's all Jalen and AJ. And one thing Sirianni said in that press conference was whether it's a coach or whether it's a player to player or coach to player, when I respect you and I like you, we're all more likely to go that extra mile for that guy. And obviously, as a teammate, when you really respect the guy next to you, you're much more likely to just work 2% harder. When you like that coach or you respect that coach, you're just willing to push yourself a little bit more. It's why, my dad was in the Army. His brother died in Vietnam. Both my grandparents or grandpas were in World War II. I went to high school with a lot of people that were in the Iraq War. It feels like pretty consistently, any veteran will tell you that ultimately in a war situation, you're not fighting for the politician back in Washington. You're not fighting for the general back at the base. You'll do whatever it takes for the guy sitting on your right and to your left. And obviously that is a life and death situation. But in football, you definitely can get injured. Your life's not on the line, but there is a physical toll. Offensive, defensive line, wide receivers going over the middle, linebackers laying it on the line, that you are more willing to do whatever it takes when you have the ultimate respect for whoever your leader is, for whoever your unit leader is, for whoever your position coach is. And like they can try to walk it back all they want. Brandon Graham has been with the Eagles since I got hired. When I got hired in 2010 and went to spring ball, like second OTA of the year in, I don't know when it was, late May, early June. Brandon Graham was our first round pick. He is I didn't know this, but when Jeffrey Lurie went out to practice a couple weeks ago and announced that Brandon Graham was going to be their nominee for the Man of the Year, which the Walter Payton Man of the Year, I would say is as prestigious of an NFL honor as the MVP. It's, I mean, you get that award like a Cam Hayward. Yeah, I think J.J. Watt's got it. I think Russell Will. Like it's something that is a really, really big deal, in the NFL. Brandon Graham's a high level guy. And no human in the history of the Eagles has ever played more seasons for the franchise than him. So when he said the comment, which I understand, maybe maybe had a few beers or a cocktail or something. He's not super locked in. He's out for the year. So he's not super in like media. I got to say the right thing. I think he's being pretty authentic and genuine. And listen, you, myself, we've all been in situations where we work with someone. Maybe our relation starts out good and then it gets weird. And I know AJ Brown said we're good. Like, yeah, it's pretty clear your relationship with Jalen Hurts, something's off. And listen, I know enough, you know, to know it's not great. But you can have a relationship with someone that isn't great and still be successful. I don't put this on AJ Brown. I put this on the quarterback because it's the quarterback's job. Part of Jalen Hurts' thing was I'm the ultimate leader. Everyone rallies around me. Like that's been Stafford's claim to fame when he was in Detroit. Like, listen, doesn't have the wins. Even some years he doesn't have the stats. But there's never been a dude that played with Matt Stafford that wouldn't fucking run through a wall for that guy. That's what we say about coaches sometimes. But if I'm not saying that about the quarterback, and I'm saying that about my guard, my tight end, like here's what I can say about Brock Purdy. Like, listen, we can argue till we're blue in the face about how much money he deserves to be paid. And I agree. Like, I'm not comfortable paying him 50. Ideally, I'd like to pay him 30. I don't really know how we work this out. But it has never been questioned. From Debo, who can be up and down, to George Kittle, to Trent Williams, to Fred Warner, those guys would run through a wall for Brock Purdy. Every guy Matt Stafford ever plays with has his back. Same thing with Jared Goff. Same thing with Dak Prescott. Kirk Cousins, felt like he developed that. Now he might just be shitty and everyone turns on him. I do think it's a little bit of a red flag on Jalen. Like what's going on here, man? Like, did you change a little bit after you got paid? Because clearly, like, Jalen's not a great passer of the ball. Like, that's not really arguable. He's not. He's a flawed pocket passer. That ain't his game. That doesn't mean he's not a really good player. He's an awesome runner of the ball. He's a big-time run threat, which opens up their offense. And he's a great playmaker outside of the pocket. But inside the pocket, if he could not run, like if against the Steelers, we just said, we're going to give him Jared Goff's athleticism for one game, I would cash out hundreds of thousands of dollars from stocks and put it all on the Steelers because they would not be able to function. But that's not his game. So is it just as simple as A.J. Brown's not getting the ball because he's jealous of Saquon? Or is it like, no, it's not quite the same as it was a couple years ago. And that is just something to monitor. And they're going to poo-poo it, and they're going to roll it back, and they're going to say all the right things. And winning, there have been a lot of players in the history of the sport that don't always get along, just like human beings. A lot of people you work with, I work with over the years, like you don't always see eye to eye with, you don't even like. I do think it's pretty difficult in this situation, and it's always on the quarterback to make sure that relationship works. That's the job of Peyton Manning, of Tom Brady, of Drew Brees, with a guy of this talent. Even if he's up and down and a weird guy, I don't know. I don't know A.J. Brown. Clearly, he can be a little emotional, but like that's on the quarterback. That's his job to lead everybody. He's the guy. He's the guy everyone's looking at. And he's the most important guy beside the coach in terms of leadership. And honestly, you could argue his voice sometimes goes farther because they're in the trenches with that guy. They got the pads on, chin strap buckled when it's a tie game in the fourth quarter. Coach is in a jacket and a beanie on the sideline with hand warmers. It just ain't the same. So this game's big. And I just think Jalen, it's just something to monitor. That's all I'll say. Something to monitor, something to keep an eye on. That's why I'm so excited to watch this game.